Our journey begins amongst the cloudy tops of the Mourne Mountains. From there we travel to Strangford Lough and the historic town of Killyleagh. We make our way to Belfast, where we discover some of the city's most impressive landmarks. Then it's on to Carrickfergus Castle, before heading inland to Lough Neagh, Ireland's largest freshwater lake. We then travel to the Antrim coast, where we discover one of Northern Ireland's most famous natural landmarks, the Giant's Causeway. After a quick visit to Portrush, we discover more ancient ruins along the coast. And from Derry, one of Ireland's last remaining walled cities, we complete our journey at Devonish Islands Monastery that goes back over 1,000 years. Looking out over the Irish Sea, these rugged mountains and lush, fertile slopes have fired the imaginations of countless generations. The mists that frequently surround these peaks serve only to heighten the region's mystique. Moist sea winds form these orographic clouds as air is forced rapidly upwards against the slopes. More than just a landscape, the Mourne Mountains have shaped the way of life here. They are also said to be the influence for the C.S. Lewis novel The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. More recently, they provided the filming location for the popular series Game of Thrones. This small, compact range extends for nearly 15 kilometres, rising 850 metres at its tallest peak. Tales of smugglers from the 18th and 19th centuries who trekked through the Mournes carting tobacco and silk are still popular. Their route was so widely used that the path still exists today. However, centuries of farming have had a far greater impact on life in this region. Plans to designate the area as Northern Ireland's first national park have been met with resistance from some locals. More than 1,000 farmers tend lands within the proposed boundary, with plots that are smaller and more numerous than anywhere else in Europe. Our journey continues to Strangford Lough, the largest tidal inlet in the whole of the United Kingdom. At each tide, 350 million cubic metres of water pass through a narrow channel, measuring only about 500 metres across. The first human inhabitants arrived 9,000 years ago, and the small community of Killyleagh has been here for centuries. The town prospered as a coaching station, and its linen mill became a vital part of Northern Ireland's economy in the early 20th century. The town's most iconic landmark is Killyleagh Castle, probably the oldest inhabited fortress in the country. The original structure was built in the mid-12th century by John de Courcy, the Norman conqueror of the region. Of course, improvements have been added over the years. The castle's soaring turrets and stalwart battlements were designed in the architectural style of a French chateau. Stretching more than 40 kilometres, Strangford Lough is studded with islands, hidden coves, rocky outcrops and sheltered inlets. Shipbuilding and fishing were once essential local industries. Today, residents and visitors alike enjoy the numerous sailing clubs and boat races throughout the area. The patron saint of Ireland, St. Patrick, is said to have sailed across these waters in 432 AD, bringing Christianity and forever changing the course of Irish history. Today, this vast area of sand flats is one of only 3 designated marine nature reserves in the United Kingdom, teeming with a diverse assortment of wildlife it serves as breeding grounds for thousands of migratory seabirds. Across the water, on the northern shores, we discover a gem hidden among the trees. Mount Stuart House, once the home of the Marquesses of Londonderry. When Edith Vane Tempest Stuart married into the family in 1899, it wasn't so much the plainness of the house that dismayed her, it was the expanse of drab lawns which surrounded it. In the 1920s, she set out to transform the estate, sparing no expense, and the result was one of the finest gardens in Europe. Taking advice from the foremost horticulturists of the day, she assembled an unrivaled collection of rare and exotic plants. Though mainly Mediterranean in style, its best-known feature is distinctly Irish. The Shamrock Garden, with its topiaries and a red hand, an ancient Gaelic symbol for this province of Ulster. The Marchioness nurtured her green fairyland, as she called it, right up until the 1950s, when she gave it to the National Trust for future generations to enjoy. Her beloved gardens are also her final resting place, here in the family burial grounds beside the artificial lake. Today, Mount Stuart is one of the most visited gardens in Northern Ireland and has been nominated as a World Heritage Site. Just across the lake from Mount Stuart stands a 41-metre structure known as Scrabo Tower. This replica of the Scottish watchtowers found along the border was constructed entirely of dolerite and sandstone taken from Scrabo Hill. It commemorates one of Northern Ireland's most beloved public figures, the 3rd Marquess of Londonderry. Charles William Vane was a general during the Napoleonic Wars and a distinguished diplomat. But it's the kindness and generosity shown to his tenants during the potato famine for which he is most revered. The Marquess died in 1854, and the tower was erected in his honour 3 years later. Our journey now leads us just east of the capital, Belfast, to the mile-long Prince of Wales Avenue. Here we find Stormont, where the country's most pressing political matters have been playing out for decades. Plans for construction began in 1921 to house Northern Ireland's newly established government. Stormont officially opened in 1932. It measures exactly 365 feet across, one for every day of the year. The rolling lawns, flower beds and winding forest paths which surround the estate offer occupants and visitors a quiet setting for a peaceful stroll around the grounds. Today, Stormont stands as a proud symbol of the government. And across the capital city, in the heart of Belfast, we encounter two unlikely icons of industry. Known affectionately as Samson and Goliath, these gantry cranes have become fixtures in the collective consciousness of modern Belfast. They dominate the city skyline and represent a trade linked in some way to nearly every local family. It was an industry that began in the early 1800s. By that time, the city had become a major shipping port. And the establishment of a construction giant, Harland and Wolff, in 1861 catapulted Belfast towards a new level of global success. The first crane, Goliath, was completed in 1969, followed by Samson, the larger of the two, in 1974. They were monumental achievements. At 840 tons, their combined lifting capacity is one of the greatest in the world. In 1995, Samson and Goliath were declared historic monuments and archaeological objects. Yet despite all this, they are actually only part of a greater heritage. The White Star Line's entire fleet of ocean liners, including the ill-fated Titanic, were built here. The city's success led to a construction boom and a legacy of great architecture. Sinclair Seaman's Church, built in 1857, is one such example. But Belfast has roots going back centuries. The town's original charter was granted in 1613. It continued to grow, and by 1888 was awarded the status of a city by Queen Victoria. City Hall was built to celebrate this accolade. With its Portland stone facade and great copper dome, this building was set to become one of Belfast's most famous landmarks. Another treasure is the Albert Memorial Clock. The Gothic-style tower was erected in 1865 and overlooks the Customs House, the city's main outdoor site for free concerts and street entertainment. But for indoor events, there's the new and prestigious Waterfront Hall, completed in 1997. Such redevelopment projects have ushered in a new era of modern architecture, demonstrating Belfast's determination to forge ahead and embrace the future. But reminders of centuries past are never far away. We travel north over the billowing sea mist toward the town of Carrickfergus. It's here we discover the ancient ruins of the town's castle. The fortress remained in service for 7.5 centuries, making it the longest-running active garrison in Ireland. It was originally built in 1177 by John de Courcy. Concerns over his increasing power led to his forced removal in 1205. However, his replacement, Hugh de Lacy, so antagonized the crown that de Courcy was eventually reinstated. And so began its long and tumultuous history, undergoing numerous additions and alterations over the years. The castle's service was finally ended in 1928, and today it remains one of Northern Ireland's most fascinating attractions. The sea mist clears as we head inland, passing back over Belfast to our next destination, Lough Neagh. At 29 kilometres long and 7 kilometres wide, this is the largest freshwater lake in the British Isles, and the third largest in Europe. Legend holds that the mythical 16-metre giant Finn McCool created Lough Neagh when he scooped up a handful of earth to hurl at his rival. Nearby, Belfast International Airport, commonly known as Aldergrove, began as the training establishment for the Royal Flying Corps during the First World War. The site remained the exclusive home of Northern Ireland's Special Reserve Unit No. 502 Squadron of the Royal Air Force, until the airport was restructured to include civil and commercial flights in the 1960s. Now, more than 5 million passengers fly through the airport each year. Lough Neagh was formed 20,000 years ago by melting glaciers at the end of the last ice age and covers roughly 400 square kilometres. This major water source for Belfast has been an integral part of life in the surrounding area. In 1976, it was recognised as a wetland of international importance to help ensure its protection for generations to come. Travelling further inland, we find an intriguing remnant of Ireland's ancient past. Megalithic monuments dating back thousands of years were found buried beneath the peat in the 1930s. The Beemore stone circles range from a few centimetres to nearly 2 metres in height. The stone rings each appear to be part of a pattern. So far, 7 circles and 9 rows have been discovered, and recent excavations have revealed burials within some of the stone piles. Experts have several theories regarding the origin and meaning of the monuments. One possibility is that the site is a lunar observatory used to calculate dates. To some, the lines appear to mark field borders and may predate the circles. It's also thought that the structures were erected as part of a ritual to restore fertility to the soil. Whatever their purpose, these monuments remain an enigmatic reminder of this land's ancient past. Our journey now leads us north to the country's most famous natural wonder, the Giant's Causeway. This striking landscape has inspired the imaginations of people for centuries. Popular legend claims that the giant Finn McCool built the causeway to keep his feet dry as he crossed the Irish Sea to Scotland to confront his rival, Benandonna. But losing his nerve, he turned and fled home with his arch-enemy in hot pursuit. In a clever ruse, Finn's wife, Una, disguised him as a baby. When Benandonna caught sight of the enormous infant, he fled in terror at the thought of encountering the father of such a gigantic child, and tore up the causeway in the panic to get away. A more plausible explanation for its creation is given by geologists. 65 million years ago, lava from volcanic eruptions poured over a chalky surface. Cracks formed in the slowly cooling rock, and as time passed, flowing water carved out the magnificent patterns we see today. The 40,000 interlocking columns have up to 8 sides, 4 or 5 being the most common. However, a popular activity amongst visitors is the hunt for the very few with only 3 sides. This natural monument has been attracting visitors for centuries. But after a period of paid admission in the 1900s, the Giant's Causeway was finally bequeathed to the National Trust, once again granting free access to the public. In 1986, it was declared Ireland's first UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Trust has continued to acquire adjoining land and today owns 70 hectares of the cliffs and foreshore of Northern Ireland's greatest tourist attraction. Further along the Antrim coast, perched high on a sheer basalt cliff, is the mysterious Dunluce Castle. Evidence suggests that some parts date back to the 14th century. It was forcefully taken some time in the mid-1500s by the MacDonalds, who are still the owners. Recent excavations of the surrounding area have revealed an incredibly well-preserved merchant town dating to the early 17th century. The dig uncovered cobbled streets, wine-glass stems and even dress fastenings, all signs of the prosperity that was once enjoyed here. But it was the absence of a nearby trade port that ultimately doomed the settlement to failure. At the base of the cliff is the cavern known as Mermaid's Cave. Legend holds that an eloping couple met a tragic end when their boat was smashed against the rocks. The young woman's ghost is said to haunt the prison tower overlooking the sea. Like Mermaid's Cave, the arches and columns along the coast have been carved by the elements. The soft chalk deposits that have disappeared from most of Ireland over the millennia have survived here beneath a shell of volcanic rock. In some places, the lava has eroded to reveal layers more than 300 million years old. As we continue our tour of the northern coast, we arrive at this kilometre-long peninsula and Port Rush. The town began as a small fishing village, but was transformed into a seaside resort destination after the arrival of the railway in the 1800s. It holds an annual celebration in honour of the notorious Scottish pirate Tavis Dhu, who helped defend Port Rush from an enemy attack back in the 14th century. Continuing west along this dramatic and varied coastline is one of Northern Ireland's most treasured historic buildings, Mussenden Temple. The structure has been perched atop the 36-metre cliff since its construction in the 1780s. Inspired by the Temple of Vesta in Tivoli near Rome, it served as a summer library for its owner, Frederick Augustus Harvey, the 4th Earl of Bristol. Set back from the shoreline are the ruins of his palace that once stood at the heart of a grand estate. Controversially for the time, Harvey was an outspoken supporter of religious equality. Though he won the respect of many church leaders in Ireland, ongoing religious tensions left him disheartened. Departing for Europe, he spent the last of his days in Italy, where he was imprisoned on spying charges. But the Earl's legacy and love of architecture remain, though only just. The coast has eroded by 9 metres since the temple's construction, and it was dangerously close to falling into the sea. Reassuringly for the thousands of annual visitors, a massive project was undertaken in 1997 to stabilise the cliff. The mild, humid conditions of this rolling landscape ensure lush greens all year round. Northern Ireland's temperate, maritime climate produces average temperatures between 3 and 18 degrees. It's no wonder that today's city of Derry is one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in Ireland. The term Derry comes from the Old Irish word meaning oak grove surrounded by water. Oak groves were sacred to the ancient Celts, and legends about these trees have survived ever since. After the English conquest and colonisation of the region around the turn of the 17th century, these massive stone walls were built to protect the newcomers from attack. In 1613, King James I of England granted this place the status of a city, renaming it Londonderry. Though remaining the official name, it is still best known as simply Derry. Today, it's Northern Ireland's only remaining completely walled city and one of the finest examples in all of Europe. Synonymous with the landscape of Northern Ireland are its spectacular system of lakes. And it's here we find the last stop on our journey, on the small island of Devonish in Lower Lough Erne. These are the ruins of Devonish Monastery, founded in the 16th century by St. Molaise. Legend holds that while resting from his labours, Molaise became spellbound by a singing bird. When he emerged from the enchantment after 100 years, the monastery had been built. It's a magical story that places early Irish Christian beliefs deep within ancient Celtic traditions. The distinctive round tower is amongst the oldest of the ruins, dating back to the 12th century. For over 1,000 years, this monastery was regarded as one of the most important in the province of Ulster. Today it stands as a splendid monument to the story of this ancient and mystical land. A perfect place to end this journey.